In a small forgotten corner of a bustling city, where the lights of skyscrapers never seemed to reach and children learned to dream with empty stomachs, there lived a boy named Daniel. He was only 15, but life had carved into him lessons most adults never had to learn. His mother worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses by day and waiting tables by night, while his father had disappeared when he was only a child. Daniel had grown up surrounded by the sound of clinking bottles in the alley behind their apartment, the groans of weary neighbors, and the hum of an old radio his mother kept in the kitchen to make the silence feel less heavy. That radio was Daniel's first teacher in music. Whenever Hotel California came on, he would sit cross-legged on the cracked linoleum floor, close his eyes, and imagine he was standing on a stage, singing to thousands who, unlike his reality, listened, really listened. His voice was raw, untrained, and yet it carried something that couldn't be taught in schools or polished in studios. It carried his heart. Still, Daniel kept it a secret. Who would believe that a boy who couldn't afford lunch at school could dream of standing on a stage where the world's eyes were on him? But fate, it seemed, had a different plan. One chilly evening, a flyer taped to a light pole caught his attention. It was worn, the ink smudged from rain, but the bold letters were clear enough: National Talent Search auditions, this weekend. His heart raced. He had no proper clothes, no polished shoes, and no money for the bus fare to the audition hall across town. Yet something inside him whispered that this was his chance. That night, he told his mother. She smiled tiredly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said, "If your heart tells you to go, then you must. We may not have much, but we have your dream." She handed him a few crumpled bills from her apron pocket, tips she had saved from cleaning tables. "This should cover your bus fare," she said, her voice breaking. "Go, Daniel. Sing for both of us." The morning of the audition, Daniel wore his only decent shirt, slightly too small and missing a button, and clutched his battered guitar, its strings uneven, its body scarred with scratches. On the bus, other contestants laughed, wearing stylish outfits, practicing with confidence, their parents coaching them with polished advice. Daniel sat quietly by the window, staring out, clutching his guitar as if it were the only friend he had. When he arrived, the hall was buzzing with lights, cameras, and hundreds of dreamers. The judges, 3 famous faces known across America, sat behind a long table, polished and intimidating. Daniel's number was called late in the afternoon, after hours of dazzling performances that left the crowd cheering. His heart pounded as he stepped onto the stage, his shirt clinging with nervous sweat. "What's your name?" one of the judges asked kindly. "Daniel," he whispered. "And what will you be singing for us?" another asked. Daniel's eyes shifted to the audience, rows of strangers staring, cameras flashing. He gripped his guitar tightly and said, "Hotel California." The judges raised their eyebrows, surprised. "That's a big song," one of them remarked. "Why that one?" Daniel hesitated, then said softly, "Because when I was a kid, it was the only song that made me feel like I wasn't alone." A hush fell over the room. Then he strummed the first note. At first, his voice trembled, fragile as if it might break at any second. But then something extraordinary happened. With every word, Daniel seemed to open his soul, pouring years of loneliness, hunger, and longing into the song. The hall grew silent. The laughter, the shuffling, the restless murmurs, all stilled. His voice cracked in places, but it was precisely those cracks that made it so heartbreakingly beautiful. He wasn't just singing lyrics, he was telling his story through every note, every pause, every breath. When he sang the haunting chorus, tears welled in the eyes of the audience. And when he reached the final lines, his voice carrying a weight far beyond his years, 2 of the judges were openly crying. The third, a usually stoic critic known for harsh words, bowed his head and wiped his eyes. As the last note faded into silence, the room erupted. People stood on their feet, clapping, cheering, some with tears streaming down their faces. Daniel lowered his guitar, his hands trembling, unsure if he had done well or failed. Then one of the judges leaned forward and said, voice shaking, "Daniel, that wasn't just a performance. That was a gift. You reminded us what music is supposed to do, it's supposed to touch the soul. And you did that." Another judge added, "I've heard professionals sing this song 100 times, but I've never felt it the way I just did listening to you." The toughest judge, his voice thick with emotion, said, "Son, you walked in here with nothing but a guitar and a dream, and you've just changed all of our lives. Thank you." Daniel couldn't speak. His throat was tight, his eyes blurred with tears. He thought of his mother, working double shifts so he could chase this dream, and in that moment, he realized that all the pain, all the hunger, all the nights of doubt had led to this stage. The judges rose from their seats and gave him a standing ovation, joined by the entire audience. Strangers who had never seen him before were crying, cheering, and chanting his name. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt seen. But the story didn't end there. As the show aired on national television, millions across the country watched, and messages began pouring in. Families wrote letters saying how his performance reminded them to hold their loved ones closer. Struggling kids wrote to say they finally believed their dreams were possible. A wealthy philanthropist watching from his home in California was so moved that he reached out to the show and offered to sponsor Daniel's musical education. And when Daniel returned home that night, exhausted but overwhelmed, he found his mother waiting by the door, tears streaming down her face. "I saw you," she whispered, holding him close. "The whole world saw you." From that day forward, Daniel's life began to change. He was no longer just the poor boy from the forgotten street, he became a symbol of hope, proof that no matter where you come from, your voice can reach the world if you dare to share it. Yet Daniel never forgot his roots. With every step of success that followed, he used his platform to give back, funding music programs for underprivileged kids, visiting schools to encourage young dreamers, and telling his story again and again so no child would feel as alone as he once did. And so, the boy who once sang to an old radio in a tiny kitchen became the young man who taught the world that sometimes the most broken voices carry the most powerful songs. His Hotel California wasn't just a performance, it was a reminder that within pain lies beauty, within struggle lies strength, and within every overlooked heart lies a story that can move mountains. The judges cried that day, the audience cried that day, and perhaps even the world shed a tear, not just because of a song, but because of what it represented, that hope is never truly lost, and that sometimes, all it takes is one brave voice to remind us all of the power of humanity.